Right guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all going to be about the difference between chipping and pitching, and we're going to be focusing on the wrist angles. Most golfers get this completely wrong. So to help with your understanding in this video, I am wearing a little device from Hackmotion. And this is a wrist sensor, and it's going to give me some great data here on my iPad that I'll feed back to you. And this is really going to highlight the difference at setup and at impact when we're talking about chipping and when we're talking about pitching. Now, very quickly, Hackmotion have kindly given me this device, and right now we're offering a huge discount. Through my code, you can get this Black Friday deal right now for the month of November, 20% off. And that makes a huge difference to the 3 levels they have. The code is just coming up here, TGA, TruGolf Academy. But if you go to my description below, I will put the link there. You just need to click on that and you can see the 3 versions and perhaps pick yourself up a little bit of a bargain. Now, even if you're not interested in purchasing one of these, there's still going to be some great info in this video that's going to help you understand the difference there, chipping and pitching. I've got here a shot of 16 yards. I've got around 4 yards of rough to cover. So I can play this a number of different ways, but the option I really can't do is putt. I have got rough to go through. If I was on the fringe there, I would absolutely putt it. Always go for the simplest option. So PCP, putt, chip, pitch. Think of the simplest option first. I'm just going to first of all hit more of a chip and run so we can see the numbers, and I'm going to talk you through the setup position. Now, keep your eye on my setup here because this is pretty vital. Okay, I heard that ping, so we've got some info to work with. Now, possibly I'd use a club with a little less loft here, but I wanted to try and hit the same club and just show you the differences in setup. So we've got some data to look through. So this is where it really comes into its own. You will see here some data. This is my flexion and extension of the wrist. That's the green number in the top. That is this, okay? So that is more of a flex wrist. That is more of a wrist in extension. So I started and returned at a very similar number. At address, I was +7. At impact, I was +9. So my wrist was slightly this way. We can't really get it this way without going into an incredibly weak grip, okay, where my hand was twisted around the golf club. But if we can return in a similar number, start a similar number, return in a similar number, that would be great. And then the one here in the blue is really to do with the cocking, up cocking or down cocking of our wrist. We call it ulnar and radial deviation. Now, importantly, my setup and my impact were both exactly the same, -24. Definitely something I want to see. I'm just going to bring up the little graph. Just before I give you some real key points there, look at my wrist here, how stable it was. Very little change. That's at the top of my backswing, back to impact and through. Very little change in wrist angle. And that's really what I'm trying to feel through the motion, okay? That there's very little change in angle. So how do we achieve that stability of wrist when we're chipping? A big thing I hope you noticed is how high my handle was at address. Not many amateur golfers do this. Get those hands up, standing close to the golf ball. So you're almost trying to, as a little cheat, really raise the heel of the golf club up in the air when you're chipping. That means you can stand closer to it. That means we can use more natural forces. The club is not swinging straight back and straight through, but it's definitely getting closer to a pendulum style action by getting that handle up, standing close. The other big benefit there is when I get my hands close, look where the grip is, right up in the palm of my hand. So it's very high. Normally an iron grip, I'd have it much lower down here in the fingers. When I'm putting and chipping, I really want to try and get that grip much higher. Why? It just locks our wrists. We don't really need our wrists for this shot. We're just looking for the rotation of our body. So almost presetting our impact position. So hands up, that gets the club up through my wrist, through my glove very high. I can stand very close to it and almost lock those positions, lock those angles there. And I'm really just trying to feel like I maintain. I don't want this happening. This is that ulnar and radial deviation. And I don't really want to see this as that flexion and extension. I want to set those angles and maintain those angles. So a big part there is the handle up, standing very close to it. And then just feel like we don't do anything with the wrists, we just rotate our chest. Okay? And to that back flag, I would personally use a club with a little less loft. So if I wanted to run out more, or go further, I wouldn't fly it further. For me, chipping is all about club choice. So I'm just going to change the club choice. And all I do, if I go into a longer shaft length, so I've gone from a sand wedge to a 9-iron here, an inch or so longer, I'm just going to grip further down the handle. So as the club gets longer, I'm going to go lower down the handle. Now I can just keep that landing area at that sort of 4 or 5 yards just onto the edge of the green. But you'll see exactly the same setup position. Very high hands at setup here, and maintain those angles. Make chipping simple. So as a quick drill, something easy you can do to take the wrist out of it that I love is just using an alignment stick. Put it up the side of the golf club, pop it underneath your lead arm. And all we're going to try and do, I'm going to turn here so you can see there is a little gap from my body to the cane. I want to maintain that gap. I don't want to lose that gap as I'm starting to flick my wrists. Okay, so we're just trying to make an action and maintain those angles. That's really what we're looking for. Stability of wrists, very high hands. Control the motion with the rotation of the chest. To really make sure that we're not using much of our body, chipping, it should be played predominantly with pressure onto your lead foot. So a big one here is high hands, pressure onto that lead foot, and then we just rotate our chest, very little hands. Now, what is the difference when we're pitching? Pitching is really something, a greenside pitch where we're looking for a lot more height, a lot more elevation. We want the ball to fly higher and stop. And that does mean there is going to be a difference here with what the wrists are doing. Let's hit one and then look at the data. So there, visually, I've created a ball flight that's gone a lot higher, that's flown further, that's stopped quicker. Personally, I don't feel like I need to play this shot in this circumstance, but if I needed to fly the ball up in the air to stop the ball quicker because the pin was cut on the front of the green, or I had something to go over like a bunker or more rough, absolutely I'm going to pitch it. What's the data say? So first of all, with the blue numbers there, I started with my hands a little lower. So I actually had my wrist more set this way, whereas I was this way when I was chipping. But the big one here is perhaps the amount of flexion and extension. With shot 1, which was my chip, at impact I was +9, okay? So that was, I was slightly this way, just slightly. But I was +22 when I was pitching, so there was a lot more movement of my wrist where my glove logo, or watch face, if you like, of my lead wrist would start to point up in the air. Now we want to set some of that address, and we definitely want to return that way at impact, because that's helping us use the loft on the golf club. So my address position and my impact position of my flexed wrist, or extended wrist in my circumstance, was very similar, +26 to +22. But you can see it got to 0 at the top of my backswing. So there's a change of wrist angles. I'm effectively getting my wrist going this way through impact, whereas chipping, much more stable. Pitching, there's a lot more play in the wrist. Now that does and can cause a lot more inconsistency for your average golfer, and that's why you should always play the simplest option. You should always think about, could I putt it, before you think about, could I chip it, before you think about, can I pitch it? Now always practice all three, because you need them. You do need the height and the elevation at times, but that was a very different reading to my last one. And just there for the visual of my wrist, this was with the pitch shot. That's at address, into the backswing, and into impact. And you can see how my knuckles here are starting to move ahead of my wrist, really helping me use and maintain the loft on the golf club. And this is obviously post-impact, but look at that plus number here of extension. So my wrist is starting to point more up towards the sky. Now, what can you take from that? One, start with the hands when you're pitching lower, okay? So we're not up here, we are lower down with our handle position. We also want to start with our hands slightly further back. So chipping, you may have noticed my hands a lot more forwards. That got my wrist less into extension when I'm pitching. I really want my handle of the golf club pointing more at my belly button. So slightly back, and that gets more cupping angle, or the wrist more an extension at setup. So I was plus 22 as opposed to plus 9, I think, at setup here. So it's definitely starting with my handle more back. And then we want to feel like we're allowing the club to catch up with our hands. We don't want to drive our hands forward. So let me just quickly hit one more and then give you a little drill to work on. Notice that handle position, pointing more at my belly button. And if I want more height, look at the amount of throw I've created. That was a lot higher, as you can see, landed by the flag and pretty well stopped. The more height I want, the more at impact I want my hands back. I do not want my handle driving forwards. So a great drill to do is just grip about halfway down the shaft. And an exercise you're going to do, chipping, very similar to using that alignment rod and alignment stick, keep the end of the club here away from my body. Whereas in pitching, I want that to come back and hit me. So I actually want to, if I gripped probably just below the grip itself, I want to try and get an impact the end of the grip here pointing back at my belly button, whereas chipping, I'm starting with my handle forwards. The grip here is almost hidden underneath my lead arm, and it's staying in that position. Whereas in pitching, you can start to see here, probably doesn't help that I've got a black grip and a black jumper, but this is showing on the other side of my forearm. There is more release of wrist. So when we want more height, we've got to feel like we allow that club to catch up with our hands. And the higher we get the club to finish, the higher the shots should start to go. So low club finish, low shot. Let me just show you that. This is a real simple way to think about it. I'm just going to use the same club just to make it nice and easy. And I'm going to hit them quite quickly. Low finish, low shot. Okay, so my hands are pretty low here. The club is very low to the ground. If I allow that club to start to point back, you see how much more height we've got with the club here. Okay, a lot more release of wrist angles, a lot more height in the action. So that could be a real simple way to think about it on the course, but get your setup position correct and good things happen. It almost is as simple as start with the hands in the right position, and it's really going to help you return into that same position. I hope that transforms your chipping and pitching. As I said, if you do want to get your hands on one of these brilliant devices, use the coupon code TGA, TruGolf Academy, but there is a link right below to give you 20% off right now. I hope that video helps. If it does, smash the thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to my channel for more content just like this.